Hello and welcome to Fork in the Road. I'm Rusty Gaylord. I'm happy to be with you here today. We're talking to Brent Keltner, and before I introduce him, I just want to say a couple things about Fork in the Road, which is this is a show about successful people and how they got to where they are. Because none of us follows a linear path in life, and there's always some lessons to be learned about the junctions and the pivot points, those forks in the road, that allow you to navigate through life and get to this place. Brent is the founder and the CEO of Winalytics. And Winalytics is a company that helps clients accelerate revenue by shifting from a product focus to a value-driven solution with their clients and the customers. He's also the author of the upcoming book, The Revenue Acceleration Playbook, which is going to be released in April. So that's something to look forward to. And we'll get some more info from Brent on that. So Brent, welcome. Happy to have you here with us.
Hey, Rusty, thanks for having me. And I'm looking forward to telling some of my stories about picking myself up at those forks in a road, because that is the key to success, isn't it?
It is. And picking ourselves up is a real part of the journey. But so picking yourself up and also making a shift, I want to kind of jump into a part of, one of the significant shifts in your experience is you started as a researcher, as a, PhD and doing research. And there was a moment when you said, this is not for me. I got to get out of here. Take us back to that moment. And what was it that helped you make that realization?
Yeah. So as you said, I spent 10 years at Stanford and the Rand Corporation doing qualitative research. And I'm a curious guy, and I loved the research, and I love talking. My research was all with banking and insurance and telecom executives, manufacturing, some about their HR and their training and their organizational development strategy and how that can contribute to competitive advantage. I love the interviews and the learning and sharing best practices. So I was there for about 5 years and got good at this. And I had David Feingold, who was one of my dissertation advisors, and I had a great research agenda. And so I one year was either principal investigator or co-principal investigator on about $3.5 million in research grants. And they sat me down at the end of the year for my annual review. And they're like, right, Brent, great year. This year, you're going to get a 5.5% pay raise rather than a 3.5% pay raise. And I was just like, all right, I love the stories and the learning, but I also want to get paid for this ability to drive revenue. I like putting numbers on the board. And so I was just like, I got to find a situation that's a better mix of those two interests and skill sets.
It sounds as you're saying that there was two elements to that. One of them was the financial piece, which is, okay, I don't want to be in this thing where I'm just eking up 5% a year. But then the other piece was also a desire for the kind of work you were doing to lean in and put numbers on the board, right? Have a little bit more accountability than what you had. It sounds like both pieces were at play.
Yeah. And I was incredibly competitive. I'm glad to see it's not my kids. I hated to lose at anything as a kid, board game, playing football in the schoolyard. And so I really just always have this drive to hit the numbers, but I was a history math guy, like this ability to tell stories, right? That we'll talk about is kind of key to a good buyer journey. So I really wanted to find an environment where I could blend those kind of left brain, right brain. And out of Rand, I made two mistakes, kind of going more for the money than the blend. And one of those was, I was going to start a company. I did start a company with my brother as an English language teaching company. And he had an established company that was easy to build off of. And I was a really good language learner with that left brain stuff. So I thought, well, I'll do this. We'll make a lot of money really quick. We'll IPO. This was in 99, right? And reality was I wasn't passionate about teaching languages and learning, and startups hard. And so we got some traction, but not nearly enough to make that successful. And from there, I went to Kaplan, a year in their higher education group. And that was an awesome year of learning for me. But this was a for-profit company that now was only about the profit. I mean, they literally, like many for-profits, if a student stayed 5 terms, they made their 20% gross margin or profit margin. It's like, I got to get out of here. So for me, what you said is kind of figuring out there are things I know I need. It took me a couple of steps, to then get with EduVentures, where I believed in their mission, which was benchmarking and researching for colleges and universities at a period when colleges were just blowing up and needed to get smarter about how they spent their dollars with enrollment and online enrollments and all that stuff. And it was finding that place where I could apply my skills, to in a mission-oriented way, something that I was passionate about. And what I wanted to do was be able to lead a business unit, kind of lead a go-to-market team. So it took a couple of steps, but I found something that really worked for me.
Well, what I'm hearing in that is this holding on to just continuing to pay attention to what matters to you and holding on to that belief that you can find your way there. And it's going to take some steps. And you tried something that you're good at, but you don't have a lot of passion for with the language. And then you found something that you've got some energy towards, but you didn't like the business model with Kaplan. Right. So it's continuing to be willing to take a step and be wrong, but you're taking steps. Right. And there's something to be said about your ability to try these different careers, right? I mean, they're almost all different careers, at least different companies, but to try these different things and say, is that it? No, not quite. I'm going to adjust and keep going. As you think back on that, did that feel natural to you? Or with each one of these steps, was there some, a little bit of friction of, boy, what am I giving up?
It's a great question. I think for me, it was natural for two reasons. One is I'm very outcome focused, A, and B, I'm very learning focused. Obviously, I wouldn't have got a PhD if I wasn't, but the way you explain that is a great way for any of your listeners that are in go-to-market or revenue leadership roles to think about what we teach folks. And this is not just true early growth stage. I mean, but it's, the 20 or the 30 or the $40 million companies that are trying to break the next vertical, or even the enterprise companies that are often rebooting because they have competition. As you said, you keep your eye on the prize, mm-hmm. the outcome, but you're not stubborn about what you try and test and learn. So let's, build some prospecting tests, different messages to different personas, and figure out who's a better persona that leads us to a better, higher quality first meeting, closing deal velocity, right? So it's the experimentation in your prospecting and selling and being intentional about saying, look, we may not get it right the first time. Mm-hmm. We want to continue and get better at that ideal customer that closes and expands at a faster rate, but that could take some time. So let's be open to testing and adjusting rather than what a lot of folks do is, I got to have a plan, got to have a certain level of activity, got to execute the activity or I'm not on track. Activity for its own sake is not a good idea in the current go-to-market environment. It's got to be smart activity.
So I think this is a great thing. I want to just dig on this a little bit, because I think a lot of smart, successful people have generated success by getting a lot done, and getting a lot done inherently has a lot of activity associated with it. You described yourself as a competitive person, very outcome oriented and so on. But you also somehow are holding this sense of experimentation and a willingness to try different things. So I'm wondering how you as someone who's very outcome focused, how do you make that decision when do I stay on this path that I'm going down and keep putting more energy into it? Or is it time to switch and go try something else? And this, by the way, applies to career, it applies to sales, right? This applies to so many parts of life.
It is. And this is, there are a couple of key things. I used to bias towards the outcome and the activity. I would just drive because I could drive. I could endless energy. I could drive. I was a rugby player. I was a wrestler. I was a distance athlete. I could drive. But what I realized watching my brother, who I partnered with, much more successful entrepreneur quicker than I was, right? Because he would just kind of, he knew what the question he was trying to answer, but he's just more comfortable with a period of uncertainty and evaluation. And the second really meaningful experience, I started doing karate with my kids probably 8 years ago now. And because I thought, this is a combat, this is a martial art, I'll be good at this. But it's not a drive sport. It's a finesse sport. It's about maximum impact with minimal effort. And doing that over time, it just shifted my mindset. Drive is not always the best way to get where you want to go. So I guess the way to say to your audience, what I find is I still feel that I feel that shortness of, I'm not getting there quick enough, I'm not getting there. And I just have to pause and say, all right, have I collected enough evidence to draw a conclusion to take the next step?
Mm-hmm.
Or do I need to, am I firm about that? Or am I just doing the activity because I feel impatient? Or do I have firm conclusion? Or do I need more evidence, right, about that? So, I mean, just a very simple example is timing on a new hire, right? For
Mm-hmm.
us, I'm a bootstrapped entrepreneur. It's like, got to get a certain amount of cash flow, like new clients lined up to say, yes, I can pull the trigger. I have 6-month visibility and we can make adjustments is one way. Just be patient. And maybe you have to pass on some people, even if they seem like they're a great fit. But I have before just, no, I got to get that person, take them off the market, right? Because I just needed to do something.
Yeah.
But then it's like, oh, but I got to get a bunch more clients or they're not getting paid what they want. They're going to leave. So I think that patience of, you know what the goal is, but what do I have to prove? What's the level of evidence to pull the trigger on the next action? And the patience around that becomes important.
Yeah. Well, I hear patience, but you also referenced being comfort with the uncertainty.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of this because there's always uncertainty in any of these decisions, whether
Yep.
you're deciding to do something or you're deciding not to do something because it's not the time yet. There's always some uncertainty of, is this really going to be the right next step for me? Well, so I wanted to kind of transition a little bit into a period of your life where you went and you were leading a go-to-market and a sales team
Yep.
in industry. And one of the things you've shared with me is that you were very successful in that role, but not following any of the standard sales playbooks, right? Not following the scripts, not following the closing mechanisms, all that kind of stuff. So tell us a little bit about what you did that was different and why you think that worked.
Yeah. And before jumping into that, on the patience thing, I'll just go back to this idea of passion, which we talked a little bit about.
Yeah.
If you're doing something you're passionate about, it's easier to have a little more patience. And if it's just about putting numbers on the board, right? It's like you can always say, well, okay, maybe it'll take 6 months later, but I love what I'm doing. And that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such a great point because it's the, when it's all about the numbers on the board, inherently you're going to have less patience.
Exactly. But I mean, in the book, the Revenue Acceleration Playbook you reference, I actually tell my story about going from an academic to being a revenue and a go-to-market leader. And what I say is, so I went through this journey. I went to Kaplan. I did the startup, went to Kaplan. I went to EduVentures. Now I'm growing a team. We had success. I partnered with another executive, Peter Stokes, great guy, launched this new division. We grew like $10 million in revenue in 3 years. Tom Dretler is our CEO, great fundraiser, right? I had to build this go-to-market team. So I went out to all of my buddies in business and I said, share your resources on sales strategy, go-to-market strategy. And all the stuff they sent me were like product battle cards, positioning, competitive positioning, all about your product, how you positioned your product, how you priced your product, get people to buy more. And I was just like, where's the customer? Because at Rand, I had been incredibly good at engaging CEOs, guys like John Reed or, the CEO of Liberty Mutual, because I was just curious about what they were working on.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd show up to the calls interested in why they were there, what they could get out of it, how participating in this research project could make them more successful. And so what I did at EduVentures is I kind of proved I launched these different programs just by asking college executives, like, what do you want to benchmark? What would be most valuable to you? What else will you do to kind of help us build a peer group? So I was saying authentically to them, look, this is about solving your problems, not about our product. It's about solving your problems, but I also need commitments from you. If you see a fit, or can you tell me if you see there's a fit or not, and we can decide if we want to move forward and then bring in some of your colleagues. So I developed this idea of an authentic buyer journey, authentic conversations, which you always start with what's in it for the buyer. Mm-hmm. And then you share your product matters. You're selling a product or a service, but it only matters when you're solving a problem for your buyer. Mm-hmm. Before that, to your buyer, it sounds like blah, blah, blah. It's just noise. Once you have a problem you can solve, and it's now, okay, and this is how our product solves that problem. And by the way, we've done it with this and that other peer. If I'm talking to Michigan State, by the way, we already work with Ohio State and Indiana, University of Indiana on this problem. This is what we did for them. And then the last thing is, this is where I'm seeing a fit. Do you see that same fit? Are you interested in taking next steps together? So I'm saying I'm trying to solve a problem for you, and I'm also going to give you the opportunity to say no. And the ironic thing about selling is when you give your buyer an opportunity to say no, you sell a lot more
Yeah.
if you're good at finding fit.
I'm listening to this and I'm thinking about sales, obviously, because this is, we are talking about the sales process and the customer journey. But I'm thinking about this in a broader sense because it's speaking a language that the other person can relate to. And that's what it means to be a leader. Whether
Yep.
that's a leader in a sales kind of function or in any kind of function, what is it that your customers in this case might be your employees, it might be your team. You could even think about it in terms of your family, right? This same concept applies in all of these different aspects of life. And to think about it from their standpoint, what does your team, what do your employees want from this company, from this experience of being here and working with you?
Yeah, look, that's an awesome insight. That authentic conversations have a lot of applications, and one of the important ones you just said. As part of this book project, we're doing a number of byline articles, and so I have this Q&A coming out with Authority Magazine, and one of the questions they ask is about somebody you learn from, right? A mentor or whatever. And I referenced Tom Dretler, who is my CEO at EduVentures, because I was exceptionally good at authentic conversations with buyers. I was just wired for it. But with my team, I was kind of like, okay, guys, this is where guys and gals, this is where we're going, right? I didn't ask, like, what are you interested in doing most in this? I was like, literally one of my colleagues called me the steamroller.
Huh. Wow.
So
Well, that's
I had a blind spot. And what I learned from Tom is if you have a team, you have people that report to you, start with their why.
yeah.
Right? What are they passionate about and build that into your approach. And so those authentic conversations, awesome externally, awesome internally. It's a great instinct.
And I got to say, what's fascinating about that story is something that you're so good at in one context. You put that in another context, and all of a sudden you're not doing it as well, right? You're steamrolling rather than you're engaging them in these conversations.
Yep.
And it takes sometimes someone on the outside to say, hey, what are you doing? You've got this ability. You're really good at it over here. Bring it over to this other place. And man, it's gonna make a big difference. And I imagine it did.
Yeah, huge. And we all have blind spots. And this is one of the things that we talk a lot about with go-to-market teams. And we have a post that's coming out about the myth of sales experience. There's a lot of sellers that'll say, well, I'm experienced. I don't need training. I don't need practice. I don't need coaching. But the reality is everybody has blind spots around the deals you work because we're all having dozens of different buyer conversations, different personas, different value props, different segments we sell into. And so being open to the idea that I probably don't have a lot of the answers on how to sell well to my buyers, but my peers do if I'm willing to listen to them, is a great instinct, is a great insight.
Yeah. That's fantastic. So I want to go back to something you were talking about around passion, because when we were getting ready for this conversation, we were chatting beforehand, and you said something like, having passion isn't enough, because there's more to the recipe than just finding what it is that you're passionate about and moving in that direction. I'd love to hear you elaborate on that.
Yeah, I think it starts with passion. But look, any early business environment, any role, anything, you start a podcast, it's hard, right? So passion keeps you animated, but you have to be intentional. It's right back to this. You have to be open to kind of learning and adjusting, and really taking your being knocked down as an opportunity to learn rather than I failed. Right. So I don't know if that's what you were kind of alluding to, but I think if you start with a passion, but then it's really what we've been talking about, this openness to learning and adjusting, and honestly learning from your peers and from your market, that what the information they're sharing you have to take it as evidence. It's not good or bad. It's a psychic fact, right? What they're telling you, how you use it is up to you. And if you take it as an opportunity to learn and get closer to that goal you've set for yourself, you're going to get there a lot quicker.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that willingness to to evolve and learn and grow.
Yep.
I mean, it's essential everywhere. So in your career as a leader, it's just everywhere, of course. Well, so Brent, tell us a little bit about how people can get their hands on your book. I know it doesn't come out for a couple months, but if there's how they can learn more about that, learn more about you, what's going on at Winalytics, share a little bit about that.
Yeah. Thanks for asking. It comes out April 6th. If they want to go to the website authenticitywins.com, it will take them to our book page, right? And intentionally chosen. I mean, when we're authentic with our buyers and customers, we win more. And we like our work more. We like our job better. So, or they could just come to winalytics.com, or they can email me directly at bkeltner@winalytics.com. And that's BKELTNER at WINALYTICS.com. I love having conversations with revenue leaders. We have a revenue leader series where we write up stories and we take, video snippets of people, innovative practices. Because honestly, I'm smart and we're good at what we do because we listen a lot to smarter people than us.
Yeah, well, and that is right there is a good recipe for success in many aspects of life.
Sure is.
Yeah. Well, Brent, thank you so much for this conversation. Lots of good insights just about life, about sales, about career pivots, passion, all those good things. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it, Rusty. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You bet.